Leadership, the action of leading a group of people or an organization. Sounds simple, right? It's not, especially during turbulent times. My name is Randall Palm, and over my 20-plus year career, I've been blessed to work with some of the great leaders in the industry. I've seen many leaders take teams and organizations to new heights, while others have struggled to empower, reward, and foster a culture of diversity and inclusion. Over the past year, leaders have been challenged like no other time I can remember, from external forces like the pandemic and social injustices, to the implications of these within their own organizations, which in some cases has completely changed or accelerated their business model. As we navigate the waters of these changes, I wanted to talk with people I consider innovative leaders about their approach to leadership, how they've applied that experience over the past year, and what they've learned. All right, everyone, welcome back to the pod. I'm really excited today to have a special guest, someone that I've known for almost 20 years and have really watched his career develop kind of from afar and now work a little closer to him, which has been really exciting. But today's special guest is Mani Sundaram. Mani is the EVP and CIO at Akamai and worn a lot of hats over the years. And now I was looking the other day, Mani, I think you have literally thousands of people working for you, which is a big number. And so love to get into the conversation around that journey and whatnot. But before we do that, maybe you can do a quick introduction for everyone listening.
Sure. No, thank you, Randall. It's obviously been a pleasure working with you. Yeah, so I've been in Akamai for 14 years, a number of different roles. I started off my career in services and support, and I'd say that's mostly my DNA still. I run 3 organizations at Akamai. Global Services happens to be one of them. I also run our IT organization, and I'm the CIO, and I run our information security organization. And great teams. All of these are great teams that report into me. So I can say that I'm lucky, but I'm also fortunate that I have the opportunity to work with a lot of really talented and great individuals.
Yeah, no, it's a big, diverse team, global, different orgs, and everything else. Maybe walk me through, where maybe the first time you led a team, and over the years to where you are now, kind of what you've learned, what's changed, what's different, with maybe how you view things, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 5 years ago, to where you see and how you lead your team today.
Yeah, so my career is interesting. I mean, I started off as an engineer, pretty common, and then I kind of started feeling that I was just too focused in one area. So I wanted to do a little bit more. Tried to get into some of the business school programs, didn't work out. I think one of the aha moments I had was when I attended previous company. I attended a customer conference. I was presenting there to customers as an engineer, and it got me interested in this notion of working in professional services or customer support, because I was always focused on the engineering side. So I was kind of looking for what to do. I joined a startup for a year, highly recommended, but it was tough. The 1 year was tough. I did a number of different things, but then that's kind of what led me to the job of working in professional services. I started off in Akamai at that time. My first project was to work on the Beijing Olympics. So you couldn't have got anything better, anything more interesting for a rookie to join, PS and start working on. So it was great. I did that. Within a couple of years, I took on my first management position, and then I worked through my career. So if you talk about things that kind of shaped me, I think one of the things I've told everybody who works with me is it's really important for us to understand what customers want. Sam Walton from Walmart, who founded Walmart, said this. He said, "There's only one boss, and that's the customer." So for anybody who's listening to this, it's really important that you keep in mind who your customer of your company, your product, your services, and keep them front and center in terms of what you're doing.
Yeah, it's a great point. How do you take that, and as you think about a team that you're leading, a services team, whatever it may be, how does that kind of manifest itself in maybe your leadership style with them?
Yeah, and so when I was directly running the global services and support teams, it was quite easy because we understood who the customer was and we understood what they wanted for the most part. Right? So we worked very closely with them. It got a little trickier when I took on the CIO job because that's an internal organization, and sometimes you don't really understand who the customer is. So the first thing you need to do is to try to understand what you're doing and who you're doing it for and why you're doing it. And it might be that some of the work projects that we're doing are targeting the external customer. But it could also very well be that some of the work that we're doing are targeting internal customers. Could be sales teams like you, could be marketing, could be services, products, engineering. So it's important to understand who your customer is. Can be internal, but it also is very important to understand what they want, when they want it, why they want it, and whether it actually adds value to the business or not. Yeah. And so once you start looking at it in that light, then I think your mission, vision, your focus, I think that just becomes a lot easier.
Yeah. I'm also curious as to how, like today you manage 3, fairly different teams, large different teams. You've got professional services, you've got information security, you've got, as a CIO, kind of a traditional CIO, IT operations. Do you find that you lead those teams differently? Do you find that there's kind of there's some similarities, but maybe walk through that a little bit?
Yeah, there are 3 different teams, and obviously different teams have different cultures. And so it's really important for leaders who are managing teams that are different like this to be cognizant of the nature of the culture, of the cultural differences. So I'll give you a good example. Global services, the mission is to focus on customer satisfaction. And so a lot of the work that global services tends to do is much more short-term in nature. Customer has a pain point. The global services gets on the call with the customer, works through the project. There are short-term actions that are done and taking place. The customer's out is happy, and you move on. IT is very different because most of the work that needs to be done is long-term. When you design software, when you design for software that's going to be in use in the company, it could be in use for 10 years. So it takes a lot longer to get things done. And it's important that you keep that cultural sensitivity in mind, because you can't push for the same kind of immediate results that you can get in global services in the IT organization, because it's very different. So it's like, you're fixing something immediate here, you're doing something for the long term here. Security has its own set of unique cultural challenges and issues. But as leaders, it's important that we all think of that in mind when we work with these teams.
Yeah. And how do you segment that? I mean, you go into a meeting with the security team and you're, and then the next hour you're on with a different team. Is it, how do you kind of shift gears in your head to where you don't kind of lose track of that and cross paths, or, are there tactics that you use or techniques that you use, or is it just kind of ingrained in your head that, hey, I'm going into a meeting with this team, maybe let me make sure I'm not, switching gears on and maybe focusing on the wrong things, or taking a short-term versus kind of a long-term approach, or whatever it may be. How do you do that?
Yeah, it's a challenge. Just basic hygiene. I try to keep 5 minutes between meetings, so that you can at least take a breather, maybe stretch your legs and just get some water. And that's just a natural reset from the previous meeting to the next meeting. So I just naturally try to do that when I get meetings together. But what I also try to do is for example, I try to bunch things up, especially for non-urgent meetings. There'll be a week full of, CIO style meetings. And then the next week could be all of security style meetings. So to the extent possible, I try to do that. Yeah. It's not always possible because a lot of stuff just comes out of band. But to the extent possible, I try to do it that way. Yeah. Also, the other thing that I've learned in terms of just efficiency of meetings and things like that is, I have a very able chief of staff. I have a very able operations team. What we started doing was to look at all the meetings that come up, and we said a lot of these are project status update meetings. Now it doesn't make sense to just crowd my calendar with project status updates meetings. So we've now got a format where we've got a 1.5 hour status update meeting once every 3-4 weeks. So everybody kind of bunches it up, and if it's not urgent, they put it into that roster. Yeah. And it's much more tight and compressed with a specific format. So you come in and you go through you go through all of that pretty quickly, as opposed to just every day getting status update meetings. That I think efficiencies like that are going to be critical for pretty much any executive to be productive. Yeah,
and I want to kind of pivot to COVID and rewinding a year, but maybe on the same topic. I think or similar topic. Once COVID hit, now I talked to a lot of CIOs, a lot of people, and I think the number of meetings just went through the roof, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of things that were, you bumped into someone in the hallway and could get something answered quickly, turned into a half an hour meeting on your calendar, right? And you were around, you weren't traveling, you were more available. You being, all of us, right? Did that change, or and maybe things are kind of settling in, but I do feel like that was a real adjustment for a lot of executives that I talked to. Was all of a sudden they had time, they were available, and meetings went through the roof. And it was really like, okay, a lot of meetings that maybe didn't have to happen, but you kind of felt like you needed to be there, much more tactical. I think people got into the weeds a lot more, and maybe now it's kind of like pulling back. And how do you organize those into chunks versus getting on everything? I don't know if you dealt with that or saw that, but it seemed like
I mean, it's constantly changing, I guess, right? I mean, like what the situation same time last year, maybe earlier March last year, was very rapid evolution, very rapid transformation into this new world, where we had to work. Hallway conversations were harder. You had to get meetings. On the flip side, though, I was on the road every 2-3 weeks,
right?
And so I suddenly found myself now having a lot more time for doing things like this. But I also found that it was beneficial in some ways to actually, it was easier for me to do things internationally, because I used to do a lot of international travel.
Right.
And now a meeting in Japan was just easy. It was another evening that you could just end up doing instead of going all the way there to meet with customers or prospects. So there's some advantages and some disadvantages. It was pretty rapid in terms of how we had to transform to this new world. And it's not fully done. I'd say we have a kind of new normal now in the last maybe 6 months, where we all adapted to this world. Things might change again with the rate of vaccinations. In
right.
the
I think
US. I don't know, when people come in.
Yeah, I think once I think there's another wave coming of, okay, people can come back in the office. What does that look like? I think it's almost like the first 6 months we're adapting or just trying to figure things out. The last 6 months have been kind of settling into maybe a new norm, or whatever you want to call it, or an interim, an interim norm. And now what does it look like? We're trying to figure out, do I end up back on the road as much as I used to be? Are we flying people in, armies of people in to go see customers? Are they going to be in the office? Like there's
going to be in the office.
Maybe not.
Or actually, even customers have gone. I mean, many people have relocated.
Right.
So even if you were to go to a customer's office,
isn't really. So on the Wayback Machine, let's go back a year. I'm curious. We start to see. I was at RSA. That was my last conference in February, and I remember being on the plane coming back, and we just started to hear words. I remember going I was getting my haircut right afterwards, and I kind of had this sense of, hey, this thing's going to get bad. And I was talking to my barber, and I said, man, I might not see you for a while. And he was like, oh, no way. Everyone's kind of in this, not denial, but just say, this thing isn't really real. And I'm like, I was like, I think you better kind of get yourself a little prepared for that, who knows? And he was like, you're crazy and whatnot. And then lo and behold, it was, a year, 6 months later, I'm getting my haircut. My hair was a little bit longer, beard, whatever. Walk me through that. You start hearing things, whatever else, kind of the leadership aspect, meaning you have 3,000 people that work. What are you communicating to them? What are you talking to them about? How are you leading? Because I think leading is easy when you're winning, when double digit growth, blah, blah. It's hard when things get hard, and they got hard, and they still are. I mean, obviously, you have lots of folks in India right now. I do too, and it's not a good situation there now. But walk me through that the leadership aspect. How did you approach that with your teams, which I assume is kind of more of the 3 different teams got different approaches for tactical stuff, but from a strategic, like, hey team, we're going to be okay. Here's what's happening. Maybe walk me through that.
Yeah, no. So just like you, I was unlucky because I'd missed the barber thing. So I did end up with
and my kid cutting my hair, and it was
DIY situation.
I had to put a lot of faith in my 14-year-old, which was a little scary, but he stepped up. So.
Yeah, just like you, I was on a plane. I hadn't gone to RSA. I'd gone to Costa Rica, and I was coming back. And just like you, I was hearing the stories of the situation in Boston unfolding at that time, and I had pretty much the same feeling. When I came to the office last day, which was on a Monday sometime, I picked up all my stuff from the office, knowing that I had mentally planned for not coming in for the next 2 weeks, meaning that I was thinking that, okay, well, I wouldn't want to take public transport.
Right.
But next 2 weeks, I kind of anticipated that it'll be challenging. So I kind of took all my stuff, most of my stuff at least, back with me. I had not expected to be not there for now more than a year. So as did most of us. I think the first thing that we had to do was there were two teams. One was, okay, let's look at customer impact. And we were looking at on the global services side, customers were going through the same set of challenges that we had. So we were trying to make sure that we gave customers all the support that they needed. The good part on the global services side was a lot of our teams are distributed throughout the world, and so they were pretty comfortable working remotely with customers,
Right.
over the phones or video. So that was not too challenging on that side. But on the IT side, it was much more interesting because now we had to enable the company to be fully remote. And so we started doing a number of tests, and we started testing out all of our different infrastructure pieces that we would need to have people work remotely for some time. Now, as you know, Akamai is in the security business, and so we have our own enterprise access client that is a much better alternative to VPN that we were also trying to use at that time. And we had significant adoption of that product at that point in time from Akamai itself, as well as customers that wanted to buy that. So meanwhile, all of that is happening. We did what we call is, after a bunch of these tests, we asked for a 1-day work from home, but this was when we were not all working from home. So we requested that all the teams work from home on Friday, March 13th. I still remember the date. It was Friday the 13th, and we had our fingers crossed, hopefully, that everything would work out well. And the test gave us a lot of good information. Everything worked out as expected. And I think that was kind of the formal beginning to getting everybody working from home. It took us about 10 days. A lot of things had to fall in place. And 10 days were all the things that we got all the pieces set up. And then there were some longer term pieces, such as things like virtual machines and so on, that we had to work with suppliers to make sure that we could do that. But that kind of went into June. But I would say by and large, pretty successful in terms of how we got everybody up and running.
Yeah. If you think about your teams themselves and the people who are, hey, Mani, what's happening? What's going on? I'm worried. The personal aspect of it. How did you, I think on my side, a lot more one-on-ones, a lot more empathy. I think there is a sense of, I was talking to Bill Mayo about this earlier, about certain people kind of say, okay, I got it, let's go. And I think in your world, hey, we got to get we got to keep the business running, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, let's focus and go. One of my realizations was a lot of people are, okay, I got that, but I'm worried. I'm a little scared. I have family. And so, being empathetic and maybe being a little bit more, creating environments for people to come in and talk about their concerns, or, kind of putting your arms around those people. And I think work became a place where, people that did it well became a rock for people. People that didn't do it well, it almost added to the noise, and I feel like I've seen companies who really galvanized around it, and there for each other. And it was almost like that work thing kind of kept everyone a little bit sane. And there were companies where maybe leadership from the top wasn't strong and they didn't know what was going on. And it was kind of a little bit, added to the concern. So how did you address that more from a personal perspective with your teams on keeping them motivated, keeping them focused, but also understanding that not everyone deals with things the same way, because I do feel like there's this, at least at Akamai, let's just go, and some people are like, whoa, I'm not quite ready to go. I need to talk to you before I go, So how did you deal with that?
Yeah, no, I think it was tough. We never knew what to expect. This is a new pandemic, new disease. Nobody knew what to do. I had a couple of good personal stories at that time. I remember, I was hearing reports about people falling sick, so tried to call people, find out how they're doing. But I had a story of a colleague at Akamai who lives maybe 3 miles down the road. His daughter was a nurse. He'd just become a nurse at one of the hospitals. In the first couple of months of her job, 3 months, she fell sick. She got COVID. At that time, it was really new. Nobody understood what to do. It was just hard. So fell sick, and then his wife fell sick. And so he ended up, he and his family got quarantined. So he called me, texted me, and I ended up doing some, grocery runs for him, dropping it off in his house. And, his daughter was luckily younger. recovered pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Wife recovered too, but slightly on the older side. So it did take her some more time to recover. So all of these things are, hit you personally,
Yeah.
right? That when you hear all these stories. So I remember doing that. My daughters made masks for local hospitals. There are a lot of these things that we did as a part of the community, because a lot of it we never understood at that point in time
Yeah.
what this is. And then the only thing you hear is everything got shut down near you. So you're like, okay, what is going on here, right? So living that part, I think, was really hard. That we were fortunate enough, I think, that as a company, a lot of our employees were, at that time at least, not that many of us compared to now, which is what the situation I see in India is just, it's really heartbreaking. But very different at that time. Not a lot of us were, the core IT teams and all the teams that supported the companies were all okay, which was fingers crossed. So we had a good team. We got everybody up and running. We are also fortunate, as you know, Randall, that Akamai offices were always designed like coffee shops. You come in, you still have to go through all the motions of logging in using your VPN or using our enterprise access client. So for us, when we just went back home, it was just a kind of an extension of that concept. So that we were really fortunate.
Yeah. Yeah. Then, and as we get through we get through the first, 3-4 months of COVID, and we're kind of getting into, past the, hey, someone's got it. What does that mean? I remember a coworker that I work with had it, and everybody was like, what does this mean? Like, no one knew. I think the uncertainty.
Yep.
I think that uncertainty was what was really hard for people, and I think, at least for me, trying to drive some level of certainty with the team, like making work a certainty. Like you're going to be here. There's a job to do. There's a purpose. Right. And being able to kind of galvanize around that. I think people felt a lot of value in that, and I think organizations that approached it that way really earned a lot of, not respect or that, whatever the word is, right, from their employees who really said, during that time, what kind of kept me going was I had a place to go. I had a place to go to work, while everything else was uncertain. I think people typically don't do well in uncertain environments. And so as a leader, I think, whether it be COVID or whatever it be, providing some level of certainty, consistency of message, consistency is really, really important. As you get into the summer, we get into social injustice events, we get into George Floyd, we get into other things where, I don't know about you, but for me, we're a little bit harder. People looking at saying, hey, what is your thought around some of these issues? And being, a 44-year-old white man talking about social injustice, I flipped the script there, and it was, I'm learning from my team, from people that I work with who have gone through it, maybe when I haven't, people that work for me layers down, who I'm like, hey, can you talk to my boys? Can you talk, I'd love to get your perspective on it, which is a complete flip, right? So the leadership there, I actually thought was more, kind of creating a platform for people to talk who had something to say, and for people maybe I, as a leader, I didn't have as much to say. I wasn't the leader, right? But aren't allowing people to be leaders that maybe weren't or didn't think of themselves. So I don't know if that resonates with you, or kind of how, with some of those situations that were more not a COVID pandemic situation, but how do you open up a dialogue around some other really hard things that are happening in our world, in our country? How did you deal with that, or what were some things that you remember as kind of working through that with your team?
Sure. No, absolutely. So I grew up for a few years in Africa. So, I had that experience, and most of my life I grew up in India, but I did spend a chunk of time in Africa as well, which really heavily influenced me. I feel that upbringing kind of led me to think, or at least understand, the disparity that exists today just across the world. And so I feel I was able to relate to that. My family and I participated in a number of community activities at that point in time, to try to kind of, at least do our job in terms of making sure that people's voices are heard, and our intentions towards, better social equality are put out there, because that seemed to be the challenge. It continues to be a challenge going forward as well, but we need to do our part in terms of participating in the community. So we did that. There's a number of other things as well. I mean, like a lot of other people, people sometimes it's hard for us to understand if you have not lived it. So, I remember one thing that I just put out there is there's a video on YouTube that influenced me a lot. The video was pretty straightforward. It talks about a race that is being organized, and the winner of the race gets $100. And so they line up all the different people, and then the person who's organizing it says, well, if you had, if you grew up without food, take a few steps back. If you grew up without somebody paying to your cell phone, take a few more steps back. So then you see from the top view, you see how differentiated the race lineup becomes. And so then you say, okay, well, if that's the situation, there's all these people who have been disadvantaged but are starting 50, 60 yards behind. What hope do they have to win a race like that? So that it's a very simple way to illustrate the concept that I think we see in society today.
Yeah.
Where a lot of us maybe have more advantages in terms of education and upbringing and financial security and so on compared to others.
Yeah.
So I was very influenced by that, and I think that was also the catalyst to my participation in a lot of these activities.
Yeah, and I think part of being a leader is being humble and being open to learning and kind of creating this atmosphere where you don't know everything, and first reaction might be to solve the problem versus just asking, what do you think? What would you do? And kind of getting everyone thinking a little bit about things in a different way, and creating a culture where, the best leaders that I've worked for are ones that were always challenging themselves, always learning. Ones that I've worked for that you learn for better or worse, maybe for worse, or ones that knew everything. And always were quick to judge and quick to solution. And I think for me, I really try to keep myself honest with not being that solution, like always having, because I don't always have it, right? And I think teams typically, it empowers them to think and grow. And man, if you get your team empowered to do those things, and it allows you, like in your role, to take on more. If you have great leaders that work for you, it's kind of like, hey, they're good. I can probably take on a little bit more or do something I'm interested in. And it's such a win-win scenario, I think, in so many ways. Well, cool. And I know we're kind of coming up a little bit on time here, Mani, but I guess one last question after this, but as you think about, kind of your leadership principles and things that you kind of, when in doubt, you fall back on, are there a couple things that you would share with the listeners on, kind of core principles, things that have really, when the wind blows and we're in turbulent times, right? Things you kind of anchor around.
Yeah. So I'm not a big management book fan because I like children's fantasy actually more than that. But if there's a few things that I've learned, I kind of have a few interesting articles, books, or videos that I've seen. Here's a couple of them. Right. So one is there's an interesting video or a book around the British rowing team and how they work for the Olympic gold. And the book and the video that I've seen is it's titled "Does it make the boat go faster?" And it's a simple video. Basically, the concept that he says, the person who wrote that says is, hey, whatever you're doing, is it helping your boat go faster? If you eat a healthy breakfast in the morning, does that help your boat go faster? Yeah, we'll do it. What about partying the pub tonight? Does it help your boat go faster? Not exactly. So don't do it. And it's such a simple concept, but a lot of times you'll end up, a lot of us in companies will end up doing things and we don't understand, are we doing something that helps us go faster, or is it just not useful? So sometimes that's a very powerful concept to step back and think, okay, are we doing the right thing? Are we doing it? Is it actually helping? That's one. So does it make the boat go faster is an interesting way to think about that. The second one I think that I've thought about quite a bit is a book called Good to Great by Jim Collins. Yeah. And in that book, he says, make sure you have the right people with you on the bus. Make sure you don't have the wrong people with you on the bus. And that's an important thing. If you need to be successful as a leader, you need to have the right people with you on the bus that you're driving. Otherwise, you're not going to be successful. The same concept is also explained in another book called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. Very interesting book that many classic management book. So highly recommend that people see that. The third one, which final one actually, I'd say is one that I've been reading recently by Clayton Christensen. And it's not a management book in as much as it's a life priorities book. And it says two things. It says one is make sure you have a strategy for your life. Because a lot of us just kind of jump into it and then we try to figure out where we want to go. The second one, which I think is more interesting for me, is another way to say put your money where your mouth is, which is when you see somebody saying something, make sure that they're deploying their resources in that same direction. So, talk can be easy, but it's a good way for management is somebody can say this is really important, but if they are not spending the time on it, because time is is the most valuable currency that we have, then they really don't really care for it. So it's an easy way to say, like, that's a really important thing for me, but you have to make sure that they're deploying the right thing. Are those meetings popping up in that person's calendar? Are they talking about it in other forums? Like that is what will tell you if they really care about it. So it's a simple concept, but it's an important thing I think that we should be cognizant of as leaders.
Yeah. No, I think where people are, and as a leader, where you're spending your time, and making sure,
Right.
you say this is critical, it's a top priority. I think that, I always joke with my team that the word priority wasn't designed to have a plural, right? And
Right.
so you get into these priorities of 6 or 8 of them, and you can only spend time on, really probably 2 or 3. And so how do you,
Right.
make sure that you focus there? And then it kind of there's an acronym called LAZY, lots of activity, zero yield, right? So are we spending those, calories on, kind of to your earlier point, on things that we think are going to have high yield or not? Or are we just busy? Because I think there is a sense these days of, I always, when people say, if you ask someone how they're doing, oh, I'm so busy. Everyone's so busy, and I wonder, like, do we all have to be that busy? I don't want to be that busy, and how do we peel things off? And I think there is in this day and age, if you're not busy, you're not frantic about everything, that maybe you don't feel like you're doing your job, or maybe you feel like, wow, it seems so busy and I'm not. Let me go make up things to do, that maybe are those lazy type of activities. So, but no, those are all great books. I think just for everybody listening, Good Great was a book that probably, I don't know, Mani, 10, 12 years ago, was given to every Akamai employee as we were trying to go from a billion to 3, we were trying to get to the next milestone of revenue, whatever it was. And that was a book because we felt like we were a good company, but we wanted to be a great company. So I think getting everyone reading a book that has, these principles in it is something that's kind of an interesting, whether it be your team or a company, which is, a different, that was a CEO driven, kind of board level driven thing. And then I think the 5 dysfunctions of a team is a fun one. I remember the first team I picked up internationally. I remember going over and sitting down with them, and my wife was reading that book for her work, and I grabbed it, and I had this 16-hour flight. So I'm like, I'm gonna read it. And it was the triangle, right? And the top is kind of the outcome, right? This is how we're gonna hit, and the bottom is trust. I remember the first day I was over there, I had this big deck presented, and then it became really clear to me that no one trusted anyone. And I remember going into the conversation and saying, hey, I was prepared to talk about how we're going to go achieve these objectives and results and these outcomes that are really kind of laggard indicators. But I'm realizing that we don't have this. I could completely change my slide deck and focused on how do we build that for the next couple of days, because without that, you don't get to the outcomes that you want. So some interesting stuff. All right, Mani, it's been awesome talking to you. I've enjoyed the conversation as always, and I appreciate you taking the time with me and the listeners today.
Same here, Randall. It's obviously been fun, and I look forward to continuing some of these fun topics. It's always good to have these conversations. This is so much fun and exciting for us.
Yeah, good stuff. All right, Mani. Thanks. Have a great day.
Thank you. Have a good weekend. Bye-bye.